All right, well, welcome this evening, everyone. It's great to see everybody. Thanks for coming out. And happy first day of spring. I hope we don't have to shovel in the morning to celebrate the first day of spring, but you know, sometimes spring can be a little challenging. We're going to talk about the eclipse today, if I can get my clicker to work. So let's just make sure it hasn't frozen up. So technology being as it is, there we go. All right, so as a way of introduction for tonight, my name is Jim Porter, and I'm what they call a solar system ambassador for NASA. And I go around to venues, public venues, to discuss what's going on in space and the various projects. Of course, we're talking about the eclipse right now. NASA does sponsor some research for the eclipse, which we'll talk about later. And I worked at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That's out in Pasadena, California. And I worked there at the end of my career and retired by love of astronomy, and decided to join up with NASA as a volunteer. So I do their outreach program. And what you're looking at here is one of the satellites we built for NASA. I was a telescope lead on this, and this particular weather satellite is to track these clouds right here. And as clouds, particularly the violent ones that come across from Africa, they come through the trade winds to the Caribbean, the hurricanes. That's what this satellite is all about. And this is actually the satellite that saves the most lives of anything we've ever done. It's very important. Now, in December of 2020, we caught a total solar eclipse right here. You'll see it streak across the Earth. So that is what a solar eclipse looks like from space. And it gives you a really good idea of what this is all about, to see it live and you know, we're hoping that ABI, that's our instrument, hoping it can catch the next eclipse so we can watch it streak across the Earth. And believe me, I'll be getting that video. And so you can see how quickly it goes. Of course, this is a 24-hour time lapse, so that 3 hours is very compressed. But it is moving 1,500 miles an hour, the shadow of the moon. So it is very, very quick. And when it comes over us, it will be extremely quick. Now, this year, 2024, is what NASA is calling the big year of heliophysics, or the study of the sun. The sun's the most important celestial body in the solar system. So we have 23 satellites imaging and taking data from the sun at all times. Those solar flares coming off the sun can be very influential on the Earth and on our technology. So we study that very carefully, including many of the observatories. That's actually a European one there. And probes, that's a solar probe that dives into the sun's atmosphere to study the particles coming off the sun. So we have a huge fleet of scientific instruments in space. And of course, this is the year of 2 eclipses. And it is also the most dynamic year of the sun in its solar cycle. It has an 11-year cycle, and this is the height of the 11-year cycle. So we're hoping for lots of solar activity on the day of the eclipse, so we can see that too. Okay, so today we will go over a little bit of eclipse history, which is fascinating. We'll be talking about safely viewing an eclipse because, you know, tonight we're going to encourage you to stare at the sun. Okay, no, I know your mom said never look at the sun, so let's ask NASA, how can we do that safely? So we will definitely talk about safely viewing the eclipse. We'll cover some of the day eclipse activities, and we'll have one slide on the future activities, eclipses that will be coming in the next 50 years. You know, we had a NASA artist named Tyler Norgan who drew some phenomenally beautiful artwork for this eclipse. So I put the Finger Lakes one up there because I particularly like this one. But he did several of them for Rochester, and you know, you can actually buy these at the Rochester Museum and Science Center. So I really appreciate those, and he did a fabulous job. Okay, we're going to start with a video, and it's just Eclipse 101.
A solar eclipse happens
and we'll just,
when a new moon
listen in on that
between the
for a
Earth
while.
and the sun, blocking some or all of the sun's rays from reaching the Earth. By cosmic chance, even though the sun is 400 times wider than the moon, it's also 400 times farther away. Therefore, the two objects appear the same size in our sky. Astronomers are able to predict eclipses because the Earth and Moon have very predictable orbits. Why then isn't there an eclipse every month? The Moon's orbit is usually tilted a few degrees north or south in relation to the Earth. When the Moon does eclipse the Sun, it casts two types of shadows on Earth: a smaller, darker shadow known as the umbra, and a larger shadow known as the penumbra. There are four types of solar eclipses. The first and most spectacular is a total eclipse, when the Moon completely covers the Sun's surface. A total eclipse can only be seen if you're standing within the umbral shadow. That's why the imaginary line created by this shadow as it races across Earth is known as the path of totality. People within the penumbral shadow see only a partial eclipse, the second type. From this view, outside the path of totality, the Moon passes in front of the Sun off-center, never fully covering its surface. Third, an annular eclipse occurs when the Moon passes directly in front of the Sun. However, unlike a total eclipse, the Moon appears too small to fully cover the Sun. The Moon's orbit is elliptical, so sometimes it's closer to Earth and sometimes it's farther away. Last, a hybrid eclipse is when the Moon's position between the Earth and Sun is so finely balanced that the curvature of the Earth plays a role. The Moon will be farther away from some parts of Earth along the eclipse's path, resulting in an annular eclipse. In other parts, the Moon will be just close enough to fully cover the Sun, resulting in a total eclipse. While a total solar eclipse happens somewhere on Earth every year or two, any given point on Earth experiences the event only about once every 400 years. We interrupt this video for an important safety announcement. Looking directly at the Sun, even during an eclipse, can cause permanent eye damage. Fortunately, there are ways to enjoy an eclipse safely. The easiest is to use certified eclipse watching glasses, which are shaded thousands of times darker than typical sunglasses. You can also look at the eclipse indirectly by making a pinhole viewer. Simply poke a small hole in a piece of cardboard. Hold the cardboard up to the Sun, allowing the Sun's image to be projected onto a flat surface. Be sure to look only at the surface and not through the cardboard. Just before the Moon completely covers the Sun, low-lying valleys on the Moon's edge will be the only spots that sunlight continues to pass through. These remaining brilliant shafts of light, known as Bailey's beads, will disappear one after another. And finally, a single bead of light remains, known as the diamond ring, signaling that you're just seconds away from experiencing totality. Once the last bead disappears and the Moon completely covers the Sun's surface, the view through your eclipse glasses will be pitch black. Totality achieved. At this point, none of the Sun's rays are reaching your eyes, and it's the only time that it's safe to take off your glasses. Remember to put your eclipse glasses back on before any of the Sun's rays start to peek through again. Any sunlight reaching your eyes, even for a few seconds, can cause serious damage. While an eclipse can last a few hours, totality typically occurs for less than 3 minutes. Animals and plants have also been known to alter their behavior during a total eclipse. Songbirds may stop singing, crickets may start chirping, and flowers may even start to close up. We won't always be able to see total solar eclipses. The Moon moves about 1.5 inches away from Earth each year. It's estimated that in about 1 billion years, the Moon will be too far away from Earth to completely cover the Sun.
Okay, so we do have at least 1 billion years to go, and we don't have to worry about not seeing any eclipses in the future for your grandkids. So today we are going to just quickly go over what was shown in the video, and this relationship 400 by 400 is very interesting. The Moon and the Sun appear from Earth to be the same size, which is very fascinating and allows this event to occur. So, but that 400 times distance, those are kind of big numbers. They're hard to visualize. So if you had the moon in your hand, it was the size of a quarter, the sun would be 35 feet in diameter. So you can see that 400 times bigger is dramatic, but it will also be a mile away. So, that 400 times distance is also incredibly hard to perceive. So that allows this shadow to be focused on the Earth here in what we call the umbra shadow. But again, that shadow is only 115 miles in diameter. So it's not a very, very big shadow when it reaches the Earth. If you're in the penumbra shadow, you can see a partial eclipse. And in this particular eclipse, the entire United States will be able to see a partial eclipse, as well as the path of totality. Now, the reason, of course, it doesn't happen every month at the new moon is there's a tilt to the orbit of the moon with respect to the direction of the sun's rays, our orbit around the sun. And because of this tilt, you can see that it only really crosses the surface of the Earth twice a year, so that there would be a potential to have an eclipse twice a year, though we don't always get that alignment. Now, the last 3 times we have this one in April, we had one in October, and we had one a year ago in April in Australia. And so, yes, you can get them every 6 months if you're kind of fortunate. Sometimes it can go a year or 2. So the one after this one is in 2026 in Cairo, Egypt. So we have to wait a little while for that. So again, the alignment can occur somewhere on the Earth a couple times, 2 times per year, but not always. And that is with respect to the types of eclipses. She did mention that hybrid one. And I scratched my head the first time I could say, I thought, wait, I don't think we've ever, and it turns out the one in Australia was a hybrid. But you had to be out in the Pacific Ocean to see so the land just saw the eclipse, the total eclipse. So anyway, partial eclipse, that's what we had in Rochester in 2017, 7 years ago, with the last Great American Eclipse. It's the most common type. We've seen several of those here in Rochester. You have to use your eye protection for the whole event. And so they're interesting events. This is the annular eclipse. That's what we had in October. My wife and I went down to Dallas, and we were going for a wedding. So we just happened to be there on that weekend. So we went and watched the eclipse, and it was really spectacular. And the moon is just a little too far away from the Earth, so it doesn't quite cover the sun. So being a little too far away, it's a little too small from our perspective, and so it doesn't quite make the total. But while we were there, we discovered by far the best place to watch an eclipse is in the hotel hot tub. And it's an eclipse event, the temperature will drop 15 to 20 degrees. And so when you're in the hot tub, it's great. You don't even notice it. And but these glasses don't work that well in a hot tub because they're paper, so you got to watch out for that. Anyway, the total eclipses, we had one 99 years ago in Rochester. So they are very, very rare. It's obvious that path of totality is just so narrow, 150 miles. It's just, you're not covering a whole lot of territory with that. So we would see this. But, this is a fortunate event for us. We're going to be right in the path this year. Okay, so a short history of eclipses, and let's watch another great video.
How have people viewed eclipses over time? Thousands of years ago, people had no idea an eclipse was about to occur until it appeared in the sky. Sometimes an eclipse was met with terror and sometimes with awe. In Nordic culture, people blamed sky wolves for eating the sun. In Vietnam, it was a frog that devoured our planet star. One myth in some African cultures suggests that the sun and the moon have been fighting, and that the eclipse is a moment of reconciliation between the two, and a time for reconciliation between people as well. In the Old Testament, the book of Joel says that on the day of judgment, the sun will turn to darkness and the moon into blood, which sounds a lot like solar and lunar eclipses. The scientific acknowledgement and the study of solar eclipses dates back to 2000 BC in ancient China and Babylonian writing. Stories recount that ancient astronomers were beheaded for not correctly predicting an eclipse. But it was the Islamic world that made the most progress in understanding this incredible celestial event. In the 9th and 10th century, these mathematicians invented what we now know as algebra and trigonometry and created the most accurate astronomical tables of their time. As eclipses became easier to predict and science education became more prevalent, we stopped fearing the eclipse and began to celebrate it as a glimpse into the workings of our solar system.
Thank you to the Washington Post for that. That was an excellent little video to introduce this topic. You know, in ancient times when people didn't understand this phenomenon and suddenly the sun goes black, it was an ominous event. And so, you know, ancient rulers, emperors, if you will, would want their scientists to let them know this was going to happen. So, of course, in China, they did have astronomers in their agency, their government agency, whatever it was called. And they were supposed to predict this event. And of course, they had this other and really unenviable job. They had to explain what did it mean. Now, what scientist would want that job? You know, what could it possibly mean? Well, you know, it's bad enough to have to predict when it's going to happen. And of course, they couldn't do that. And so they went and got drunk and executed them. You know, that's probably a bad job to have. Astronomy is a lot easier now than it was back then. You know, in Assyria, 763 BC, there was another eclipse recorded, and they dug up that stone right there in the 1800s from that city in Nineveh when they were excavating it. And sure enough, they recorded that eclipse in June 15th, 763, and they said it was about an insurrection in the city. So they had said it was a sign of a revolution in the city there. And so that actually, this was one of the ones attributed to the Bible as well. So these eclipses have been going on and people have been watching them for centuries. And so here's an incredibly important eclipse that occurred in New York. And so if you have been to Ganondagan, you may know this story. If not, the 6 native nations of New York were meeting with the Seneca Nation, the nation from our area. They were meeting at Ganondagan on August 22nd, 1142 AD, and they were trying to convince the Seneca Nation to join the Iroquois Confederacy, and an eclipse happened that day during the meeting. And it convinced the warlike Seneca Nation that it was time for reconciliation. It was time to join the Iroquois Confederacy, and that's how they date that meeting and that time when the Confederacy was ratified. So very interesting event that happened right nearby, and I was telling this story at the Victor Library. And it turns out that they're going to actually have a meeting later in the month, and they're going to talk about this at Ganondagan. I didn't know that when I put this slide up, but I wish I could go to that. You know, by the 1800s, the science community had instrumentation now where we could actually do some scientific investigation about this phenomena. And the very first thing we learned utilizing telescopes was we were able to see the moon in much greater detail. And right away, we realized the moon is not smooth. Okay, though it looks a little smooth from our perspective, when you zoom in on it with the largest telescope we had was a 40-inch reflector. They looked at the moon and they realized there was all kinds of mountains and craters and irregularities on the landscape. And because of that, it was allowing light to peek through during the eclipse. And so that was discovered by a man named Francis Bailey. And to this day, we call them Bailey's beads. This light that peeks through. Now it peeks through right as it's just about to go total and when it's coming out. So both sides will have some Bailey's beads. So you'll see that during your eclipse watching this year. By 1868, the science community had invented an instrument called a spectrometer. And that's basically passing the light through an optical system that will then run through a prism and spread the spectral response of out so that you can see the contents, the color of the light, if you will. And while they were examining that, they noticed that there was a new absorption line, that there was a new element in the sun they did not know about. And so they named it after the sun god Helios, naming it helium. So we discovered the element helium during an eclipse in 1868. So it was a fascinating a period of our history in science, in the science community, that we were using this amazing event to do some actual science. Now, we repeated that in 1869 at the first Great American Eclipse. It happened, it went from Oregon to Kentucky. It was basically our first one where our science community participated. And we had scientists like Sarah Frances Whiting, who is from Wyoming, New York, and went to college in Leroy. And she was the professor of astronomy at Wellesley College. And so, of course, they did the same research. They took the spectrometer, and they thought they found an element, but 70 years later, we found out they were wrong, that it was iron heated to 1 million degrees. And the only way we figured that out is somebody had to heat iron to 1 million degrees and then figure out, oh, wait, that's not what we thought it was. So that does happen. You know, by 1878, this is sort of the zenith of our viewing of eclipses. We had an eclipse we called the Rocky Mountain eclipse, and it went right down the spine of the Rocky Mountains. So if you can imagine an eclipse that goes from Canada right down through to Mexico, right along the Rockies, and we sort of view that as the first high altitude eclipse. You could go to the top of mountains and watch this eclipse. And so people, of course, did that. Thomas Edison and his staff and many of the colleges, some of them climbed all the way to the top of Pikes Peak, and they got these amazing images. The higher you go, the more beautiful the image is. You're getting above the Earth's atmosphere. And again, a group of ladies, and Mariah Mitchell and her crew came out from Vassar College. They came to Denver and they studied the eclipse. And eclipse watching and the study of astronomy became very much a women's participation, event. And it was kind of rare, this in terms of the science that was being done, that women were beginning to contribute. Now, if you were to look at the PhD candidates today, you'll find that more than half of them are women. So it is very much a discipline dominated now, although it took a long time. They were the pioneers, like Sarah Whiting and Mariah Mitchell. They were certainly the pioneers in this, but it is an area of study for women scientists, certainly. Now, by far and away, the most important scientific eclipse event occurred in 1919. And in 1911, Albert Einstein, Princeton University, had issued his paper called the General Theory of Relativity. And in that paper, scientists realized, oh gosh, during an eclipse, we can prove to see if this is correct. Because, he predicted, his theory says, the sun's mass is so great that it's going to warp the space around it. And if that is true, then light, which would travel in a straight line, would travel in a straight line, but if the line isn't quite straight and space is warped, it actually go around the sun. And so they realized, okay, we can then take plates during an eclipse or photographs, and we can see if those stars are out of place. And so in 1919, there's several books written about this because this is such a monumental event for relativity. They imaged the solar eclipse in 1919. This image was taken in Brazil, and the eclipse went all the way across the ocean to Africa, and it was imaged over there in Africa as well, and both plates show that the stars are out of place. So Einstein is right. The New York Times the next day, Einstein triumphs in the headlines, that yes, relativity is correct. It was also almost the longest eclipse that we've ever seen. It was 6 minutes and 50 seconds of totality. So amazingly long eclipse. And so that can happen when you're on the equator. Now we're nowhere near the equator here, 45 degrees north latitude. We're way off on the side. But if you're on the equator and you get a supermoon where the moon's very close to the Earth, you could get totality that really is spectacular, almost 7 minutes of totality. I think the theory is 7 minutes and 2 seconds as long as you can get. So, you know, I can only imagine if we had one like that. I'd go see that, if that would happen. Okay, it's 2017. Now, eclipse watching has become much more of a spectator event. You know, less science going on, much more public interest. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to equip the public to understand the eclipses. And last time, we got 200 million people to watch the eclipse. Pretty spectacular. And, you know, I always ask the kids, how do we know that we got 200 million people to watch the eclipse? How many glasses? Very good. How many glasses did we give out? Perfect. So we're hoping to eclipse that number this go around, and we're going to give out more than 200 million pairs of glasses. So because across 11 states, that eclipse was widely watched, and you know, people would go all over the East Coast, usually down to Kentucky. My daughter-in-law went to North Carolina. South Carolina had it as well. It was a beautiful day. There was a picture from Wyoming that NASA sent some photographers out to Wyoming because they realized the International Space Station was going to photobomb the eclipse. So they focused their cameras that had the filters on it, and for that 0.6 of a second right there. And they got 6 images as the space station went through the sun. Of course, it just crossed in front of the sun, and we got a beautiful, beautiful image of the space station photobombing it. Now, this coming eclipse, here's our official NASA map of the path of totality. As the sun goes from Mexico up through Canada, we call it the North American eclipse because it does have all 3 countries involved. It does, of course, cross right through the Midwest and Northeast. It's going to, this eclipse goes through many more large cities compared to the last one, the 2017, which went through kind of through an less populated area of the United States. We're going through cities like Dallas, San Antonio, St. Louis, you know, Indianapolis, Columbus, or right outside of Cincinnati, just barely eclipsed Cincinnati, and of course Buffalo, Rochester, and so, you know, Montreal, it actually is in the path of totality. So we have a lot of large cities this year in the path. And it starts off the west coast of Mexico around noon, and the totality will then cross into Texas at about 1:30 when we hit central time zone, and then it proceeds up through Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Indianapolis, as I mentioned, is right dead square center. Cleveland is also in the center of the totality, and of course that's us, the little red star right there. And then it goes out, it hits us at 3:20 in the afternoon. So that's the number you have to remember, 3:20 in the afternoon. I'll give you the exact number if it matters in a few minutes, but 3:20 in the afternoon, and it's going to last for 3 minutes and 35 seconds, totality. So that's when we want to be right there watching. And then, of course, it goes out through the Canadian, through Newfoundland and in Maine, actually. Oh, the Adirondacks, if it's a nice day, and some people are climbing the mountains, they're going to get a spectacular view of this eclipse. Okay, zooming in on that. Oh, here's the data right here. So again, Cleveland, Buffalo, Rochester, and I talked last night at Hamlin, and Hamlin is right on the red line. And they were really thrilled to be right on the red line. Right, that's dead center in the path of totality. Brockport is also dead center, and I've got them next week, so we'll see how people react. Here's the data. The eclipse, what we call C1, or that's first contact, when the eclipse starts as a partial eclipse at 2:07 in the afternoon, and then totality will be at 3:20 and 12 seconds, if the 12 seconds matters. It will last 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and it'll end about 4:30. So the eclipse will be, I cut off C2 at the end, so, or C3 is about 4:30. So those are the data points for Irondequoit. I try to update this for every place I talk. Tomorrow's in Pittsburgh, so I got to go back and get this updated for Pittsburgh. So let's talk about safely viewing. We'll run a quick video on this.
Two solar eclipses are coming to North America. An annular eclipse will produce the famed ring of fire effect on October 14th, 2023, along the path of annularity stretching from the Pacific Northwest to the Gulf of Mexico. Although stunning in its own right, this eclipse is just the warm-up for the main event, a total eclipse of the sun on April 8th, 2024, sweeping a path of totality from Mazatlan, Mexico to Newfoundland, Canada. These phenomena are thrilling to watch, but you must follow some important safety guidelines to ensure that you have the right equipment to protect your vision. Here's what you need to know. Do not look at the sun without proper eye protection. Doing so can cause permanent and irreversible damage to your vision. Use approved solar filters during all partial phases of both eclipses. There is only one point during a total eclipse when you can safely remove your eye protection, and that's during totality, when the entire solar disk is completely covered by the moon, revealing the sun's outer atmosphere called the corona. The October annular eclipse does not include totality, so you must use your filters for the entire eclipse. During April's total eclipse, only a small section of North America will actually experience totality, and this brief period will last less than 5 minutes at most. For the rest of the eclipse's partial phases, leave your approved solar filters on and enjoy the show safely. Keep in mind that not all solar glasses and filters are created equal. NASA recommends choosing filters that meet the newest and most stringent ISO safety standards to better protect your eyes from harmful solar radiation. Unfortunately, not every company has made the switch to the higher standard. Look for this label on the packaging: ISO 12312-2 2015E, filters for direct observation of the sun. Celestron's Eclipse Bar products with solar-safe technology all conform to this standard. Our solar glasses, solar telescopes, solar binoculars, and solar telescope filters filter out 99.999% of visible light and the invisible spectrum, including infrared and ultraviolet light. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and enjoy the 2023 and 2024 solar eclipses.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that reminder. You know, NASA is very, very adamant that we follow these guidelines. So that's one of the reasons I'm coming around and talking about the eclipse, so that everyone knows that they absolutely have to get the eclipse filters that meet the guidelines. Now, it turns out there are counterfeit filters out there. There are counterfeit glasses out there, and they even try to replicate the little symbol on here. I noticed that on one of the glasses they showed me that was counterfeit. That standard NASA wrote many, many years ago, and they updated it to the -2. That's the 2015 is the -2. So as long as it says 12312-2, you're covered. And that's what these glasses, here's the pair that you're going to be able to get here at the library. It's a SEAL glasses, solar eclipse activities for libraries. So they'll be handing those out, right, April 1st?
April 1st, there'll be two pair available for each household. 2
pair for household. Just come here to the desk on April 1st, and they will have free glasses for you. So even though you get them, you want to make sure that they're right. I'm sure the ones here will be right. They have the ISO, and here it is printed right on the temple of the glasses. It actually has the manufacturer's name on there. You know, and this one was American Paper Optics Company in Bartlett, Tennessee. So, you know, then you might want to make sure you inspect them to make sure there's no scratches, and we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. And we ask people, please don't try to make homemade filters like they would have done 200 years ago. They would have made homemade filters. Please don't take, you know, X-ray film and stack it up. Somebody brought that one up. Or, you know, old Kodak film that's really dark, you know, stack up a bunch, and please don't do that. Obviously, you can't, even the darkest sunglasses are only 90% shaded. And we're looking for 99.999% or 10,000 times darker than the darkest sunglasses. So that's why it's so important that we're equipped correctly. The sun is just incredibly radiant, and you have to have the darkest possible lenses to watch it. So Here's the eclipse glasses that the RMSC bought. They have 700,000 pairs of them. So even if you get glasses here, you can also go get more glasses. There's lots of places to find these around Monroe County. And they do have the 2-layer lens filters, filtering out every wavelength that's required to meet the standard. You can actually put them right over the top of your glasses. So I'll wear them right over my glasses because they have adjustable temple here so that you can get it the right width. We ask people to watch their kids. If you give a pair of glasses to the kids, make sure they're using them correctly. I'll show you how to look for scratches. There's the label right there. You can see it. You'll see it on your glasses when you get them. And there's the verbiage, filters for direct observation of the sun. So as long as we've met the standard, we know that these filters will work correctly for us. So are sunglasses safe for viewing an eclipse? No. Definitely no. So here's how you look at here's a NASA scientist. I love putting this video up. She's right from Goddard Space Flight Center.
Are your eclipse glasses safe for looking at the sun? Let's check to see if your eclipse glasses can handle the heat or if they need to stay inside. First off, never check your eclipse glasses with the sun. That's a good way to injure your eyes. Take your eclipse glasses and find a bright light, like a lamp or a flashlight. Hold your eclipse glasses up to the light and look through them. The light will appear extremely dim or not appear at all when looking through the glasses. For example, you should only be able to see the filament of a light bulb, but not the globe surrounding the bulb. Also, if your eclipse glasses have any marks or scratches on them, don't use them. If you have older eclipse glasses from a previous eclipse, give them a check to make sure they haven't been damaged or scratched. All safe eclipse glasses will meet the ISO 12312-2 standard. It's best to store eclipse glasses in a safe place where they won't become scratched or punctured. Remember, never look at the sun without eclipse glasses or a solar filter. Be safe and happy sun viewing, everyone.
So here's a pair from 2017 that I had. With our libraries, we're still handing them out. Even back then, we handed out 2,000 pairs at Gates. And I still have a few of those. And as long as I check them the way she mentioned, I just, kind of hold them directly up. I usually use a bright light, and you can't see the light through these. And if they were scratched, you'd see a little tiny pinprick of white light. And then okay, I can't use these. Because they would be hazardous to use to look directly at the sun. So that is how you do it now, especially if you were buying eclipse glasses in, say, like a Wegmans or a place where they're just out in a bin or someplace. You would want to check them, okay, to make sure they weren't mishandled or anything. When the library got some, they're all stacked up in this flat. They're in a flat box, rubber banded together, and they're protected, and they're not going to get scratched. So when you get them here, like our librarian last night was, they fold them up and they put them in an envelope for you, and as long as they're in the envelope, they're going to be completely safe. So you can get glasses all over the county. Obviously, right here in Irondequoit, there's this list is quite long, and this is the list off the RMSC website. So you can go to the website and find, and there's many more locations of this. I just took a quick snapshot of it. Yeah.
Are they free?
So they cost $2.
Okay, because I've seen it for $2.
Yeah, they cost $2. They're free at the library, though. That's why we want patrons to come in, right? We want, because they're free at the library. Okay, so yeah, lots of places we can get the eclipse glasses, or you can use an indirect viewer. That's what I did when I was a young man in 1970. I saw my first partial eclipse, and the eclipse was I used to call it the Carole King eclipse. Does anybody get that joke? You took your Learjet to Nova Scotia to see the total eclipse and stuff. Oh yeah, I used to call that the Carole King eclipse. And so here it was a partial eclipse, and we watched it. And so we took a box and we cut the bottom out of the box, and then taped a piece of paper on one side of the box, and on the other side we put a piece of tinfoil over a hole and punched a little tiny hole with a pencil. Little tiny hole. And if we pointed that at the sun, we'd get a projected image, and it's what we call a pinhole camera. and us Rochesterians, we're familiar with this. You just point that at the sun, you put your head right in there and you can see, watch the eclipse indirectly. Or actually, NASA also recommends you can do this. I always like to tell the kids about this one because, what kid doesn't have a cereal box at home? And so, of course, you have to eat all the cereal, get that out of there. And then take that piece of paper and put it in the bottom of the box. So there's your white piece of paper in the bottom of the box. And you cut a couple holes in the top. And there's the tin foil we're going to put around one of the holes, like the other viewer. And you take your little, I don't use a nail, I just use a little sharp pencil. And, just punch a little tiny hole. And if you point that at the sun and look through here, you're going to see an image of the eclipse. So there's one right over there on the table. I do want to warn you, though, if you do make this, keep it away from your dog, because my dog ate the last one. I tell the kids, because, it still tastes like cereal. The dogs love it. So NASA recommends that we do that, and we try to get the kids to do that. I try to bring cereal boxes with me.
How about
Yeah.
the sunglasses they sell on Amazon, are they?
So I would be a little worried about some of the glasses on Amazon, because that's where I saw the counterfeit glasses, was on Amazon. So it's much better if you can see the glasses you're going to purchase and hold them and look at them and make sure that they have the requirement printed right on there, and the manufacturer's name and the location they were made. Now, just because they're not made in America doesn't mean they're not certified. So some of them in China are certified. Yeah. Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Usually that comes up during Q&A, but welding goggles are permissible by the NASA standard, but there's only one shade that meets it. So it's called shade 14. And so only the green welding goggles meet the shade 14 standard. So yes, NASA will certify one type of welding goggle, the shade 14. But if you go online, they cost about $50. I wouldn't trust the ones at Harbor Freight too much, but it's so much easier just to get these because they're available everywhere. And but if you have welding goggles, NASA says if they're 14s, you can use them. And we used welding goggles when we were in Dallas. So one of the maintenance guys had his welding goggles, and he brought them out, and they were shade 14, so we used them. Yes?
Can you look at the sun after the eclipse anytime with the?
Oh, that's a great question. Can you look at the sun anytime? Sure, with eclipse glasses.
Yes.
They don't have to be used during an eclipse, right? We could go out and look at the sun tomorrow. Of course, it would just be a round ball, but no problem. The eclipse glasses work all the time. Now, some other ideas about indirect viewing, right? We taught the people in Dallas how to do this. So there's a picture of my fingers. So just put your fingers out like this, and the sun's over your shoulder, and it makes a shadow on the ground, and it shows you the eclipse in the shadow. Now, this isn't going to work for us here now, but you could go to a tree. Okay, so the trees don't have any leaves right now, but if they did have leaves, you could see the eclipse in the shadow of the tree thousands of times. Now, it doesn't work with pine trees, so this only works with deciduous trees, right? Or you could tell your kids to go get your mom's colander, right, or anything with a little hole. So that colander will give you, in its shadow, hundreds of eclipses to watch. But one little girl that had the colander said, I can't use this because it strains my eyes. That's the best eclipse joke there is. If you Google eclipse jokes, that'll be number one. So I saved that for this slide. Okay, so again, there's the great question. Does the sun emit any dangerous rays during an eclipse? So the answer, the sun always emits dangerous rays all the time. Please don't look at the sun. It's always going to be dangerous. The moon doesn't focus it or anything like that. The atmosphere does shield our bodies, but it's not going to shield our eyes. Okay, so our eyes can only stare at the sun for seconds before damage starts to occur. One of the world's smartest scientists decided to do a test on this. His name was Sir Isaac Newton. In 1680, he decided to stare at the sun, and he went blind for 3 days. It's just not a good idea because it does damage extremely quickly to your tissues that are so very sensitive to light. That's why they work so well. So the sun is always emitting these dangerous rays. Now, you know, here's a telescope, one of my telescopes, and we put filters on the front of the telescope so we can see very close up. So here's an image of 1 year ago. 1 year ago, we had perfect weather. And so I was in my backyard, and I got my telescope rig out, and I imaged the sun, had a beautiful day, but I have to use a filter on the front of it. Now, people ask me, oh, can I just put these on and then put my binoculars up? Okay, no, these are made of plastic, okay? So if you're gonna take a light collector like that and point it at the sun, it's gonna burn through these. So please do not do that with these lenses. Please use a filter on the front of a big telescope like that so that you don't damage your eye. So that's what, I've got several of these. A lot of the astronomy clubs have been working on these. And so they're quite, I'm going to have 3 telescopes at my event. So hopefully they'll be around and you get a chance to see this close up. Okay, so now during totality, you don't need the filter, but you only got 3 minutes for this. So you can take your eclipse glasses off. It's about the same radiance as a full moon. So basically you're seeing the light that's around the sun, but not the light from the sun. So you're getting the solar atmosphere illuminating the Earth. And so even with binoculars or a telescope, you can see this. And again, it only lasts the 3.5 minutes. So I want to show you this. This is on the shore of Argentina. And remember that eclipse I showed you in the very beginning? So here's the video. This video. Here's totality. He's just holding up an iPhone and recording this. And so he's got the total eclipse of the sun. Beautiful image from an iPhone. What's the first thing you notice about that? Small. Okay, it's small. Yeah, he had to zoom it way in, right? What else did you notice? What about the people?
Yeah,
all right, so it's exciting, right? Yeah, eclipse watching is a social event. And when you're with people, people are going to react to this. Now, granted, it was in Latin America, so people maybe reacted with a little more enthusiasm. If it was in Germany, they'd probably be, I don't know, you know how it is. So people react differently, but I think it's a great social event. So on the day of eclipse, we're highly recommending, go get together with family and friends and maybe go to a community event or a church, a library event, things like that. So let's talk about the day of eclipse activities. Of course, the first thing we got to talk about is Rochester weather. What is the weather going to be on the eclipse day? Now, there's a lot of people, especially the eclipse chasers, that want to make sure they see it. So unfortunately for them, they're going to have to go all the way to Mexico, where you have an almost 80% chance to see this. So the fraction of cloud cover down there on April 8th is about 23% chance it'll be cloudy. 80% chance it will be clear. But as soon as you get to Texas, it's 50-50. Now, I hate to tell everybody that's going to Texas, it's still dicey, it's still 50-50, even in Texas, and it degrades as you go along the path of totality. It degrades quickly to Lima, Ohio, right outside of Lima. It's 75% chance it's going to be cloudy. So really interesting effect happens right there when we hit the Great Lakes. When we hit the Great Lakes has amazing impact on the weather, and it turns out Cleveland and Rochester are the places to go.
Wow.
So in the springtime, the weather will clear up out over the lakes, and the lakes begin to clear our weather. And of course, it gets worse from here on out. And then Quebec, it's, 80% chance of clouds and so forth. But then again, you get to the Bay of Fundy and some of the oceans up there, and it gets better again. So anyway, it's a really interesting effect of the Great Lakes that happens here in Rochester and Cleveland both. So you can go on AccuWeather and get the forecast for April 8th, and you'll find out it's going to rain.
No.
Yeah, but the day before it's sunny, and then it starts raining, and then the day after it's sunny. So again, this is 3 weeks from now, okay? So we have plenty of time for this to move around a little. Last week, when I did this, it was sunny on Monday. So, how the weather is, trying to predict the weather. This is only a little better than the Farmer's Almanac at this point. Okay, so how Farmer's Almanac is always right. I tried to find out what the Farmer's Almanac prediction was, but they didn't have it. But we're watching this every day, and yes, it is moving around. So we're hoping for good weather. Now, I'm telling you, even if it's a little cloudy, go out and watch. Because it is interesting how many times things change. If you don't like the weather and you live in Rochester, what do they say? Wait 10 minutes and it'll be different. Okay, because that's the way Rochester weather is. And I've had 2 friends, they were watching eclipses, and they went out and it was cloudy, and all of a sudden the clouds parted and there was the eclipse, and they got their image and they saw the eclipse anyway. So yes, that could happen. And so please go out anyway. We'll be watching that. The 2017 eclipse, I was in Saranac Lake, New York, so here's some of my pictures. There's my 2 sons watching it so that I could prove to my wife that they did wear their eclipse glasses that she gave them, and went on our camp out. And we did some picture taking. Picture taking, of course, in Rochester is going to be a big deal. So there'll be a lot of people taking pictures. They'll get their solar filters. There's one of my telescopes. I can put my camera on the back of that. We made a whole bunch of homemade filters for those. And the biggest question is find out how you control your camera, and to make sure that it can take these images correctly. So a lot of people are going to do this right here. Hey, you have a filter. Just stick it in front of your glass. You stick it in front of your iPhone, right, or your Android. Now, these things do not have an eclipse setting. I think Apple really missed out. They could have made iPhone 17 and say, hey, this has an eclipse setting. And they probably would have sold a couple million of them. But you can figure out how to control the gain of your camera so you don't, what we call, saturate it with the radiance of the sun. And actually, there's an app that'll do it for you. This company, American Paper Products, they make a little filter that goes on your phone, and they give you an app that goes with it. So you can do that and figure out how to, if you want to get a picture right with your phone. Of course, during totality, you can take that off and just image it directly. And we recommend, please remember to enjoy the eclipse. You know how photographers are. They get so enthralled with getting the picture. I know several professional photographers, and that's all they want to talk about, how they're getting ready for the eclipse. But I'm telling them, please, look, it's only 3 minutes. Please make sure you enjoy the 3 minutes, because you're never going to see this again in your life. So that's what we'll be doing. A few photography people will be there. If we are fortunate enough to have a beautifully clear day, this is what the sky will look like if it was dark. And guess what? It's going to be dark during the eclipse. Hey, that's amazing. So there's the sun right there, 42 degrees north, and 42 degrees elevation. It's in the southwest. And so if that's blocked by the moon, suddenly we're going to see the planet Venus right below it. And that's going to stick out. That's going to be an amazing sight. The planet Jupiter is going to be almost at the zenith, almost right above us. It's going to be beautiful. Saturn and Mars will be down at the horizon. So, there's 4 beautiful planets that will be totally visible during the eclipse. And the planet Mercury is going to be right above the sun. And that's going to look like a star, but we'll see it. So it's pretty amazing. 5 planets. That's one of the most I've ever heard of, that are going to be in the sky during the eclipse. And there's actually a comet right here And who knows if it's gonna be bright enough to see it, but it could be. So I know photographers, astrophotographers from our astronomy club down in Iona, they're gonna be trained on that comet to try to get that picture during the eclipse. So
Can you show where the comet's gonna be?
yeah, it's somewhere right in this area above the sun. And I guess I need to do a little more research on that to make sure that it's gonna be visible. But it's right over by the sun right now. We can't see it at night. You know, it's going to be only visible during the day if there's an eclipse. So, yay, we got an eclipse and we can see it. So that's what could be seen. Like I said, you know, the stars will be completely visible to us during the eclipse. And hopefully we'll see those planets. Can't wait for that. You know, NASA does do a little research during every eclipse. And what they do is they chase it with their high altitude research aircraft. So it's called a WB-57, and the kids, usually I'd show you the picture that they get, but the kids always want to see the airplane. So I'll show the kids the airplane, and there's the cameras right there in the nose of the plane, and they chase the eclipse, and they can't chase the eclipse. How fast did I say the eclipse was going, anybody? 1,500, and that plane goes 600. Okay, so they're gonna fly along, and the eclipse is chasing them. Right? They're not chasing the eclipse. The eclipse is going to go right over the top of them, and these guys will get 6 minutes of totality. We get 3.5, they get 6. So even if you were going 600 miles an hour, by the way, you could have gotten a Delta Airlines ticket from Dallas to Indianapolis for $1,300 during the eclipse. They delayed the flight so that it would be during totality on the flight up, which would have been spectacular except for the $1,300. And I didn't find out about it until there's only one seat left. So, you know, that sold out in less than a day.
What if you're on the wrong side of the plane?
Well, you know, that's going to be, you're going to have to be very nice to your neighbors so you get a chance to see it. We're also recruiting as many ham radio operators as possible to join the NASA contest called the Solar Eclipse QSO Party. And the reason we do this is the only way that you can investigate the ionosphere, which is the upper atmosphere that traps magnetic particles and reflects radio waves. So the only way you research that is with radio. And so we have ham radio operators that operate during the eclipse, and then we take their data, their log books, and we give it to the University of Scranton, and they generate a model to see what happened way up there during the eclipse. And what will happen is it will change the way radio waves are reflected off the ionosphere. And so it'll actually block some of the signals. So you'll be talking, and then the signals will go away, and then they'll come back as the sun, the shadow of the moon goes over us, and it affects the upper atmosphere. So I did speak at several ham radio clubs around here, trying to recruit the operators to join us on that day and make as many contacts as they can and send their data into NASA to do this research.
Jim, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
We've got a patron on the Zoom call who asked if streetlights will go on during totality.
So yes, yes. And so what you want to make sure is if you're in a location with a community event, that there is somebody from the maintenance service there that can turn the lights off.
Ah, okay.
So yes, they will. So my event, we have that, we know where the switch is. You know, we asked RG&E, hey, can you just like throw a switch somewhere and turn them all off? And they said, no, that would be a bad idea. Strong Hospital would be very upset if we just turned out the lights. So every individual place would need to know. So here at the complex in Arundecoit, should the recreation department hold an event, someone will need to know how to turn the lights out, the parking light lights. Yeah, great question, thank you. Now, eclipse tourism, as I've been doing these lectures, this is my 42nd one. I've run into eclipse junkies that they run around all over the world to see eclipses. You know, some of them just run around the country, like Ken here. You go, where did you go? Kentucky?
Western Kentucky.
Western Kentucky. So, you know, people do that. You know, my daughter-in-law went to North Carolina to see it. You know, but there'll be people that will fly to Mexico. I know one guy that's going to Texas. And I'm still a little iffy on Texas because the weather's not that great.
Yeah.
You could go to other cities in totality, should their weather forecast be, but it's a little late to start deciding that now, because you're gonna have to sleep in your car, because all the hotel rooms are booked out. There are other local alternative sites, as I mentioned before. There may be sites around here that have better, weather. One of the easiest things to do would be to go up toward the lake, which, guess what? Arundicoit's one of the places you would go. It's up by the lake, where the weather might be better. Or, we're telling people, look, you can always live stream it. NASA will live stream this event. NASA live streams every eclipse. So we live stream the one in Australia, the one in Texas, and 3 or 4 places. For this event, we're gonna live stream it from 30 different locations. So this location from Rochester will be live streamed, I believe it's Sodas Point is where they're gonna put their cameras. So they have a couple of students from RIT that will be out there, hired, brought on by NASA to do this event. And you go online, NASA Live TV, and you can watch every eclipse. Okay, so lots of gatherings, they're all listed here. There's over 100 gatherings that are going on in our community. Lots of community events, the recreation departments, the libraries. The public market is having a big one downtown. That's where you'd want to go for the food, and that's why I would go there, would be the food. Innovative Field, that's, the Red Wings Field. They're going to have a great event. Again, well, good food. Greece is having a big, massive event. They're getting a big circus tent. TSC and Gates, that's where my wife used to work. That's called Total Sports Experience. And I'm telling them, look, you got to change your name because it stands for Total Solar Eclipse. So you got to change your name that day. Put up a new sign. You'll get a lot of people at your event. They also have 12 soccer fields, so it'll be a great place to watch. My event's in Rush. That's a little town down south of Henrietta. It's where my library is. And the Rush Museum Science Center is having a huge day, Eclipse Day. They're actually having a NASA scientist or a NASA astronaut come in for the event this year. The tickets are online. And I'm one of the speakers on Sunday, so come and listen to some great speakers down at the RMSC. And of course, there's many, many more. They're all listed here. There's a live map on the website if you want to find a location nearby you. And I think it's buried in there somewhere. You would find the Arundicoid event, but it may not be up there. You just click on events right there on that website, and it brings up this map. And you can find a live view of all the events.
You think Lake Ontario Beach Park would be it?
Lake Ontario, Hamlin Beach State Park, Webster Park, lots of spots that might be really good to watch this eclipse. Yes, sir?
The Helmer Nature Center is around the corner.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Very good. I knew someone here would know that.
In my backyard.
There we go. Very good. Yeah.
Just go through my gate.
Okay, so I promised you that I would talk about the next solar eclipse in Rochester, only it's in 120 years. Okay, so this is it, everybody. This is our once in a lifetime. Now, there is another one happening in 20 years. It's in Montana. I guarantee you there are eclipse junkies that'll fly up and go to the one in Montana. But there's a much better one happening 21 years in 2045. And it's going from Northern California right through down to all the cities, the big cities in Florida. So those of us who are retired to Florida at that point will get a very nice view. Tampa, Miami, Daytona, all those big cities, Jacksonville will all be in the path of totality that year. But it's in 21 years.
And it's in the sun.
Yeah, in August in Florida. Yeah, I need an eclipse for that. To survive that. All right, so the next Rochester eclipse in 120 years. We had the last one 99 years ago, so that's not that unexpected to wait that long. But that's actually not too bad. Does anybody remember how often eclipses happen in any one location? It was said in the video. It's about 400 years. It's a little less than 400 years. Now, how did they figure that out? Well, they've been looking at eclipses for thousands and thousands of years, right? And so they've been charting them all, and they just don't happen very often, they realize. So NASA now, with our computers and all, we can predict exactly when it'll happen. And unfortunately, we have to wait quite a while before we see another one. Okay, so I've said a lot, and I just wonder, does anybody have any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
What about lunar eclipses?
So lunar eclipses, we've been watching those for years and years, and they're obviously way more common than a solar eclipse, especially a total solar eclipse. But we just had one a couple months ago. I've forgotten the date, actually. And so, yeah, we do. We have them quite often, and we call it the blood moon. And it's a lot of fun to watch that because the moon turns bright red. So we love taking pictures of the blood moon. And that's a lunar eclipse. Why does it turn red? That's the question. So think about what's happening, right? The Earth is blocking the light from the sun. So on the moon, you're seeing every sunset on the Earth. And they're all reflected on the moon. So that's what we see when we look at a sunset. We're seeing the beauty of the Earth's atmosphere as it filters and darkens the sun down to a red hue. That's what you're seeing reflected from the moon.
But I've seen them advertise, blood moon. They never say that it's an eclipse.
I know. Sorry about that. Yes, another question.
Yeah, one of the patrons on Zoom said, could you please repeat one more time the recommendations on how to use a telescope and
Sure.
the eclipse glasses and protection to watch the eclipse safely if you have a telescope?
If you have a telescope, you absolutely have to have a filter on the front of the telescope.
Okay.
A telescope solar viewing filter.
Okay.
So it's made out of the same material as these. The material isn't that much different than this, only that it's just bigger in diameter. So you can get these in all different sizes. They make them up to 10, 12, 14 inches. Mine are small, they're only 5 or 6 inches for my telescopes. But yes, you can't use these glasses to watch through a telescope.
Okay.
You have to have that filter on the front.
And then another person asked, how can you video the event with an iPhone?
So you can video it through the glasses, but again, you have to try that ahead of time and figure out how to dial your phone in so that it will not saturate the imager.
Okay.
But during totality, you could just image it like you would a moon.
Okay.
A full moon. Yeah. That's a great question. Yes, ma'am.
Totality is about 3 minutes.
3 minutes and 35 seconds.
How long is the whole?
It starts at 2:07. It ends at 4:30. So the whole event is a little under an hour, 2.5 hours. So, it goes from 2:07 to 3:20. That's 1 hour and 13 minutes. And then you'll hit totality. And then there's 4 minutes, 3 and some minutes of that. And then another hour and 13 minutes.
So you need to wear your
Sounds like a.
You have to wear your glasses during anything other than the totality, the 3 minutes. Yes. Yeah, somebody asked me that question today because they needed to know when they were going to close their business. Because you really don't want to be open for business and have your people park and then get blocked in, and it's just going to be mayhem. We didn't want the students on their school buses. So last year, the Rochester school system thought, we'll just, it's right at the end of spring break, so just take an extra day and to keep the kids off the road, and that's why then the parents are responsible to have the kids use their eclipse glasses. And the Rochester school system did give out, every child is getting a pair of eclipse glasses when they come home for spring break. So yeah, they're doing a great job, but they didn't want the kids on the buses and blocked in for 3 or 4 hours in traffic.
The teachers want to see it too.
Yeah, and the teachers want to see it, of course, yeah. Any other questions tonight?
So
Yes, ma'am.
what can we expect on the roads?
So the Rochester Transportation is expecting hundreds of thousands of visitors. 300,000 is the number at what you hear. 300,000 visitors, if you're anywhere close to the thruway, is going to be a problem.
300,000 visitors in Rochester alone.
In Rochester alone, in our metropolitan area. So, and why is that? Well, you know, my sister's coming in from Boston with her husband. Well, me and like 100,000 other families, their kids are coming in from everywhere. One of my friends I had lunch with today, he said, oh yeah, we've got people coming in from Florida and the West Coast, and they're all coming into Brockport because it's right on the red line, and they all are having a get together. That's how it happens. And so the airport will be kind of a zoo before and after, and the roads will be pretty bad as well. So we're telling people, please come in early, get to your location, you know, right after noon, you know, well before the eclipse, so that you're not stuck in a traffic jam, and be prepared to, you know, sit around after the eclipse for quite a while. Don't get too impatient with all the traffic that's going to happen with 300,000 visitors. Yeah, Ken.
I can verify that from 2017. I was in Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
After the eclipse, we left. We were on Interstate 80 for a while. It was bumper to bumper, stopped. Interstate 80.
Yeah, Interstate 80. So 90 will be the same way. I live on the Thruway, and I won't go anywhere near it. I live right near exit 46, and it's going to be, like you say, bumper to bumper.
It was
They say
crazy.
get your groceries ahead of
Yeah, oh, I know, I know. So, all good questions, thank you. Yes,
Now, a total eclipse or solar eclipse, it only happens when it's a new moon?
it'll be a new moon because the moon is between us and the sun.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with eclipse, but why is half of the moon dark?
So,
I know I knew it at one time, but you know, why
the
do we have
moon
phases?
is revolving around the Earth, and when it's 90 degrees to us, it's still 180 degrees. You know, it's directly illuminated by the sun, but we can only see half of it. See, we're seeing a dark side and a light side. And so we can usually only see the light side. We can't really see the dark side unless it's a little tiny sliver, and then you can see the dark part. So that's kind of cool. But when it's directly between us, so NASA has a saying, when the moon's between us and the sun, it's a solar eclipse. When we're between the sun and the moon, it's a lunar eclipse. And if the sun gets between us and the moon, it's the apocalypse. So that's the end of days. It's all over at that point. That is the end. Okay. Well, hey, thank you so much, everybody. Everybody's been really good. Oh, my battery's running out. Feel free to grab some information.
There's going to be a free play at the end of April at the Unitarian Church on Winton. We started with 390 at the end of April about the eclipse in 1878, and that woman who you saw pictured in the photo.
Oh, okay.
Students from Master, it's going to be about 15 different scientists.
All of this material is NASA material. Most of it
And
is.
it's going to be.
Yeah, it's all on. It's all on.
Give me a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Friday night
I have a
and
fast
Saturday.
question.
Yeah, no, you know,
It's only at night
I
because
have
they're doing